Hi everyone, welcome to Travel Massive Hoi An and Da Nang chapter. We will start in a couple of minutes. Please message me meanwhile, let us know where you're joining us from. You can either use chat box on Travel Massive event page or on Facebook or on YouTube, depends on where you're watching us from. It's exciting to see people register from all over the world. It's probably one of our biggest events organized by Hoi An and Da Nang chapter. We had 3 workshops. All of them are focused on helping our members survive the crisis. So we thought it would be useful for everyone to learn or improve their skills. So we've been inviting different speakers to speak on different topics. Okay, so today's workshop is focused on Google Analytics. The guest speaker today is Justin Butlion. My name is Natalia. I'm a co-founder of Secreted Experiences, and I'm a chapter leader of Travel Massive Hoi An and Da Nang. Let me introduce you, Justin, who will be doing a 40-minute presentation, and then after he'll answer your question. So Justin has been a digital nomad for the last couple of years. He's currently based in Da Nang. He's an experienced business analyst and analytics infrastructure specialist. He has been working in high tech for over 10 years, and he's also founder of Project BI, an education site for analysts, operations specialists, and entrepreneurs. He will be teaching us today the basics of Google Analytics, what is the best way to use it, how to improve your sales online, basically the main things, whether you are familiar with Google Analytics or not. I hope you learn new things today. And please don't forget to ask your questions in the chat box, which I will ask Justin at the end of his presentation. Are you ready to start, Justin?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this initiative, and I want to start by just thanking Natalia for this great opportunity. As Natalia mentioned, I'm going to be talking about Google Analytics today, and as Natalia mentioned, if you've never even heard of Google Analytics, then it's all right. I'm going to kind of start from the bottom, and as we go through my presentation, we'll be adding more to the pyramid until by the end, hopefully, you have a good idea of what Google Analytics can do for you and your business. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and jump straight into it. Okay. Great. So the title of the presentation is How to Maximize Google Analytics. But as Natalia mentioned, we're going to really start from the beginning and go up. Natalia did a great job to introduce me, but I'll just quickly repeat some of these points. I've been in the analytics and business operations space for the last few years. About 2.5 years ago, I became a freelancer. I left a job. At the time, I was based in Tel Aviv, where I basically built my career in the high-tech space. And since then, I've worked with over 25 companies around the world as a business consultant, specializing in analytics and business operations. My kind of main focus and passion is on helping businesses become more data-driven, really help them understand themselves better, and be able to answer questions with the help of data. And as Natalia mentioned, I'm also the founder of Project BI. It's essentially my site. It's a blog education site for analysts, ops specialists, and entrepreneurs. And when I started out, in business operations, there weren't many blogs out there which I could learn from. So about 3 years ago, I started the site. I have about 50 articles. And if you want to learn about analytics, especially for early stage companies, I invite you to check it out. So what are we going to cover today? Actually, quite a lot. We've got about 40 minutes. I'm going to keep an eye on the time and, either speed up or slow down depending on how things go. But I really want to start from the bottom. I'm actually going to focus initially on some of the fundamentals. Google Analytics, like most tools, you learn it as you play with it. I've never done a course in Google Analytics or any, structured training. I just spent a lot of time playing around, reading about it, watching videos, and that's really the best way to learn a tool like Google Analytics. So we're going to start out talking about what is Google Analytics. Basically, I'm going to give you very quickly how to get started, meaning how to actually add Google Analytics to your website. Some of you might, not be using Google Analytics today, so I'm going to show you briefly how to set it up. I'm going to show you how to kind of navigate within Google Analytics. It's a very robust platform. There's a lot going on, even for myself, with a lot of years of experience. So I'm going to kind of guide you on the best ways to navigate through the platform. We're then going to spend a lot of time in the different reports. I'm going to really focus on what I consider the key reports. As I said, there's a lot in the platform. I don't think all of it is super useful, to be quite honest. So I'm going to focus on the reports which I use in my, to monitor my business, and what I think you guys should be using as well. And we're going to talk about, audiences, traffic, SEO, website performance, a whole bunch of topics. Then we're going to kind of, once we've got the fundamentals out of the way, we're going to talk about more advanced topics like, funnels and using goals and events. And that will help you to kind of see how the platform can be leveraged for decision-making and for optimization purposes. I'm then going to talk briefly about e-commerce and how that's connected to Google Analytics. Show you, we're going to talk about dashboards and how to kind of simplify things within Google Analytics. And, throughout the talk, I'm going to be kind of talking to you, from the viewpoint of a business analyst. So you'll kind of learn some more advanced ways to look at the reports and actually understand the information being shared. And then, at the end, we should have enough time for Q&A. Great, so let's start right from the beginning. What is Google Analytics? If you've never heard of Google Analytics, the easiest way I can describe it is Google Analytics is a reporting tool. It's designed to help you understand what's going on your website. And I want to kind of emphasize this, put a lot of emphasis on the fact that it's a session-based reporting, a traffic reporting solution. And I mention that because people sometimes try to do too much of Google Analytics, and it then creates problems. What Google Analytics is and what it should be used for is to understand your traffic. I actually had an interesting discussion with a client recently, and I gave him the analogy of, Google Analytics is kind of like your camera system, in your store. So if you've got like a small, imagine you're running a supermarket, you've got cameras that are watching who's coming in, which direction they came from, what are they doing within the store. That's kind of a way to think of Google Analytics. It's not the best analogy because, with Google Analytics, you don't have analytics on individuals. It's kind of more aggregated. But I think it's a close enough analogy to work with. This slide is to kind of just show you how popular Google Analytics is. If you've, like I said, never heard of Google Analytics, it's a free solution by Google. It's been around for a long time. And this slide I actually found from a blog post that was published in 2015. And just to show you, it's in the top 10 sites based on Quantcast, about 70% are using Google Analytics. In the top 100,000, it's 67.9%. So it's a very, very popular solution. And what I tell my clients, and really anyone with an online presence, if it's a blog, if it's even YouTube, has integrations with Google Analytics, you should be using Google Analytics. There's really no reason not to. Okay, so why is Google Analytics so good and so popular? Well, as I mentioned, it's free to use. It's relatively easy to set up. It scales well, meaning that it's essentially free forever. I mean, I've worked with businesses with millions of monthly visitors, and they don't come knocking and say, okay, now you need to pay us. So it scales well as your business grows. It's very, very popular as an integration option. What I mean by that is every platform you can think of has Google Analytics integration, and I'm actually going to cover a few of those in this talk. And to be honest, I don't think it's too difficult to learn. It's within a few hours of playing around and a bit of reading, you should be able to grasp the basics of Google Analytics. Great. So I now want to kind of talk about how to get started with Google Analytics. Google Analytics is, as I said, it's a reporting tool. So in order to track what's going on your website, we need to add the Google Analytics code to our website. And there's a few ways to do that. The three main ways to do this is either manually adding the code to the website. Secondly is using Google Tag Manager, which I'll talk about briefly. And thirdly is through an integration. As I mentioned, there's lots of different platforms which have direct integration with Google Analytics, and that's usually the easiest way to get Google Analytics set up on your site. So, if you're using, for example, WordPress or Wix or Shopify, all of these platforms are going to have very straightforward, easy ways to essentially add the Google Analytics code to your sites. So the first method I want to talk about is the manual method. And basically, when you set up a Google Analytics account, you're going to, one of the steps when you set it up is Google Analytics will present you with a piece of code. And you basically need to add this code to the header of your website. So I've basically just taken a screenshot. And if you're technical, then you would just go ahead and do this yourself, or maybe you would just send it to a developer and say, listen, here are the instructions to add it to our website. We need it on every page, and we need it in the header of our site. And the developer should know what that means. The second method is using something called Google Tag Manager. So Google Tag Manager is another free service of Google. And essentially what Google Tag Manager is it's a service which allows you to load up tags on your website. And tag is basically a piece of code. So you would essentially add Google Tag Manager to your site once, and then whenever you needed to load new scripts or pieces of code in your website, you would just do that within Google Tag Manager. And it means you don't have to go through developers. And in the case of Google Analytics, it's actually very easy to do in Google Tag Manager, because Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager are both Google products, so they make that very seamless. And I've just taken a screenshot to show you from my Google Analytics, from my Google Tag Manager. You would just set up a tag, Google Analytics, you would add your tracking ID, and that would be it. It would load on every page on your site. And the third one is integrations. And like I said, depending on whichever platform you're using for your website, you would most likely have a way to load Google Analytics on that site. So in this example, I just took a screenshot that I found online of Analytics WordPress, and you can see over here, all I would need to do to load Google Analytics on my WordPress site would be to paste my tracking code in that field, and click save, and that would be it. So if I go back over here, I've got it. I don't have it included actually on the slide, but when you create your Google Analytics account, you would see that you now have a certain code called the tracking code, and that's what you would add to the WordPress settings if you had this specific plugin. Other examples, if you had Squarespace, you would just paste that little code in the little box in settings. And same for Zendesk, they've got a way to load Google Analytics on your support pages. Great. So before we kind of move into, the reporting and the real benefits of Google Analytics, it's important to kind of discuss some of the language that's, used with Google Analytics, the terminology. So Google Analytics, has its own, language. Like I said, it's been around for a long time. It's one of the, real pioneers in web analytics. So it's important that we cover some of these terms before we actually jump into the reports, so you understand what we're actually looking at. So over here you've got some examples, and I'll be covering all of these. So we have users, sessions, bounce rate, landing page, new versus returning users, and there'll be a few others as well. Okay, so the first one is users. Basically, you see users in almost every report because it's very much fundamental. We're talking about individuals that are visiting the website, but the correct way to think of users is think of it in terms of devices. So if you have like John Smith and he visits the website on his computer, and then John Smith visits the same website from his mobile, then you can have two unique users in the reports, because Google Analytics is tracking devices on the level of cookies. So each device is going to get its own cookie, and that way you're essentially counting devices. So it's important to remember that. Today, people can have multiple devices, and if they're visiting the same site multiple times in different circumstances, then they're going to show up in the reports multiple times. Unfortunately, and I can tell you this from a lot of experience, a lot of people make the mistake thinking that what I see in a reporting tool like Google Analytics is, super accurate. Unfortunately, there's all kinds of reasons why the numbers aren't necessarily going to be accurate, but it's the best we have, and you'll soon see when we jump into the reports how we can kind of use the information we have to make decisions, even though we don't necessarily need exact numbers. The next term I want to cover is sessions. This is getting a bit more complicated now. A session, in a nutshell, is a visit. It's someone comes to your website. The minute they hit your website, a session starts. And think of a session as a collection of page views. So if I come to your website and I land on your home page, and then I view 3 pages and then I leave, that's one session with multiple page views. Okay. The one nuance which is important to note is that a session, the length of a session is basically going to be 30 minutes. Well, let me take a step back. Basically, there's a logic built into Google Analytics which states that if there's no activity within a 30-minute period, an activity is basically defined as a page view or triggering an event on the website. If there's a period of 30 minutes where neither of those things have happened, then the session ends, and if the user re-engages, it's going to start a new session. So think of it like this: if someone visits your website and they're now they're on one of your pages, and then they leave the page open, they go for lunch, and they come back an hour later. They then move to another page. Since there was that gap of 30 minutes with no activity, at least 30 minutes with no activity, it's going to start a new session. So that's just important to note. And, there's a lot of little nuances around things like the length of sessions. And if you want to dive really into the details, then, Google's your friend. You can run this query and visit that page that I've shown in the screenshot, and it really goes into detail on, what starts a session, what ends a session, etc. So now I kind of want to do a little bit of an example to cover a few more topics. So, imagine you've got Jim, and, he's on Twitter, and he clicks a link. He clicks a link in a tweet, and he comes to, Travel Massive's homepage. And he then sees a link to this event, and he clicks through and he visits that event page. So in this example, we have Twitter as our source. That's our traffic source. That's how Jim got to the website. It's the source of the traffic. And Travel Massive it's a page view, but it's also the landing page. So we have the concept of a landing page in Google Analytics, which I'll cover a bit later in the presentation. And then when Jim leaves the site from the Google Analytics event page, that's considered the exit page. And these can be kind of useful because these terminologies exist in the reports, and you can then paint a picture when you're going through the reports and what people are actually doing, where they're landing on the site, where they're leaving. And this can kind of give you an idea of potential pitfalls within the website and navigation issues within the website. So, in this example, we've got one user, which would be Jim in this case. We have one session and we have 2 page views. So, think of it that way when we're looking at the aggregated numbers, what this means. Now, the next point is I want to give you another example, but in this case, Jim comes to the website, he hits the Travel Massive homepage, but he doesn't go anywhere further. He doesn't go any further into the site. He leaves the site from that point. So this is a session with 1 page view, and a session with 1 page view is considered a bounced session. So Google Analytics has this term, which is quite unique in the web analytics world, which is bounce rate. And bounce rate is essentially the bounce sessions divided by total sessions. Another way to think about this is what is the percentage of visits to my website where people only view 1 page. Why is this important? Because, for example, Google, as part of the ranking algorithm for, in the world of SEO, is if someone searches for something on Google, comes to your website, and then he immediately goes back, so he clicks the back button and he goes back to the search results, that would be considered a bounce session, right? Because they only viewed 1 page. And Google's going to notice that because the person came straight back, and it's actually going to penalize your page because it basically tells Google that there wasn't, the page didn't answer the question that the visitor was after, and that's going to hurt your website rankings, your page rank, your keyword rankings. So a bounce rate is something you want to keep an eye on, especially if you're very invested in SEO and content marketing, because high bounce rate is going to indicate that you're struggling to provide value for your keywords, and you're going to want to improve those. So just a lot of people ask me this, what's a good bounce rate, what's not a good bounce rate, should I be worried that 50% of people are not going any further into my site? I can tell you from a lot of, looking at a lot of websites, bounce rates are typically in the 70 to 90% range. You're going to see on Project BI, I've got a bounce rate of about 88 to 90%. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad site. So I wouldn't obsess too much about bounce rate. The one kind of nuance, though, is important to note is that if you've got an extremely low bounce rate, like under 15%, it typically actually indicates a technical issue with your Google Analytics. So, if you've got a bounce rate of 2%, 3%, which is what I've seen with some of my clients, it usually means they're loading Google Analytics more than once on the website, and that's going to screw up the bounce rate. So take a look at your bounce rate. If it's, anywhere above 30, 40%, you're probably all right. And, a typical blog might have a very high bounce rate of 85, 90%, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. The next topic I want to talk about, where, people get excited about Google Analytics, is the fact that it can really show us how people are coming to the website. So what Google Analytics does is it's got its own logic to categorize the different sources where people are, the sources of traffic to our website. So, in the slide, we've got Twitter, Google, Google search, email, and then, maybe someone came from another blog, right? So these are like 4 different categories of traffic. And, this can get a bit confusing in Google Analytics. So I want to try to break this up and explain it. So the way Google Analytics does this is it basically has 2 different layers of categorization of all the traffic that comes to the website. The level 1, which is kind of the highest level, is what you call the default channel groupings. And I'm going to show you in a second the list of what those are. The second level is a lot more complicated, and it's basically each visit to the website is going to receive a value for the source, medium, and in some cases also campaign. And this is kind of a multi-layered, segmentation of traffic. And I'll talk more about some of these examples in future reports, in some of the reports. But what's important to understand is, it's kind of an inverse pyramid in the way that Google Analytics is categorizing traffic. So, like I said, level number one, default channel groupings, is the biggest grouping, but the traffic is grouped in those in the default channel groupings based on the values for source, medium, and campaign. And I'll give you one or two examples later to flesh this out a bit. So just to cover briefly, this is the official list of the default channel groupings in Google Analytics. So you have organic search, basically traffic that comes from Google, Yahoo, Yandex, all the big search engines. You then have referral traffic, which is going to be traffic that comes from other websites. Think of it like blogs is the easiest, or news sites. Sometimes social media traffic will also come, will be categorized as referral traffic, but in most cases, it actually is under its own category, which is social. We then have email. There's a bit of a nuance around email, which I'll talk about as well. You then have affiliates, paid search, other advertising, display. Those are all kind of relating to, online advertising. You then have other, which is basically traffic that you've tagged yourself, but don't fall into any of these categories. And then direct. And direct is important to understand because people think of direct basically like the word says. They came to my website directly. They typed it into the browser. But in actuality, direct traffic is all the traffic that doesn't fit into any of the other categories. So direct traffic is essentially traffic where we don't know where it came from. And it does obviously include, when they enter it directly into the browser, if they clicked on a bookmark in their browser, but it could also be, for example, from email or even social networks, which are behind, a secured domain. So most of the time, direct traffic is going to be high because over time, it's actually getting harder for Google Analytics to know exactly where traffic is coming from. And there's, a few reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into this time. If you want to kind of dive into the actual logic behind these categories, what puts something into email, what puts something into social, you're more than welcome to run a search in Google and visit the page I've shown on the slide. Okay, so time's moving, so I'm going to speed up a bit. The next section, basically you have this concept in the world of web analytics called UTMs, UTM tracking or UTM tagging. The idea here is that you, as a marketer, can actually tag your traffic. If you control a link, so say, I'm running an ad on Facebook, I could write this link that I've shown on the presentation, on the slide, and that allows me to actually push the traffic that comes from that link into the categories that I define, the categories that I want. So in this case, we can see here that we have UTM medium equals display, and that means it's going to fall into the display category from the default channel groupings, right? So we have some control as marketers, in terms of where traffic is appearing within the reports. And a very cool thing is the concept of UTM campaign, where we can put an actual, give an actual value on a link relating to an actual marketing campaign or ad campaign. And that way in Google Analytics, as you can see in the screenshot, we can actually go into the specific traffic reports and understand how our specific campaigns are performing. And that's really, really powerful. So we're not completely reliant on Google Analytics' traffic reports. We have some control. Okay, so great. Let's jump into the reports. Natalia, are you still with me? Everything going all right? Okay. Cool, guys. So I have a lot of tabs. Gonna try and get through as much as I can, so we have some time for a Q&A. I'm going to be showing you reports from my own Google Analytics account. As I mentioned, I run Project BI, so we're going to be looking at the Google Analytics account for Project BI. And yeah, I'm loading Google Analytics here using Google Tag Manager, if you remember the different methods. And this is essentially a blog. I do have some e-commerce components to this, but you know, it's primarily a blog. So let's jump into Google Analytics. So if this is the first time you've seen Google Analytics, then congrats. It's a really awesome solution. So this is the first screen you're going to see when you log into Google Analytics, the home screen. And this basically gives us a snapshot view of what's going on in our account. So you can see over here, we're looking at the last 7 days. And we can see here number of users that have visited the site in that period. Revenue, unfortunately, you know, I'm not making millions from Project BI yet, so revenue is 0 in that period. And sessions is 1.5. So as you might have understood, a user can visit the site multiple times. So sessions are always going to be higher than users. The next we have over here is this active users right now. So this is kind of a cool little addition that Google Analytics added a few years ago. It allows us to see essentially real-time traffic. And if I come back here to Project BI and I just refresh, and I come back over here, and we now actually look inside the real-time report, I can actually see now this visit, which is me. See over here, it's picking me up. You know, I'm in Da Nang right now, but it's picking me up in Ho Chi Minh. That's just, you know, because of how the internet infrastructure is set up. Not really anything you can do about that. But, you know, this report's not especially helpful, to be honest. So don't spend too much time in this report. But what it is good for is to actually confirm that Google Analytics is loading correctly on your website. So, you know, if I now see a visit and, you know, what I'm seeing makes sense, then great. We now confirm that everything's working. You have a few kind of sub-reports, so I can go into locations inside the real-time report and it will show me the countries of the people on my site right now. But as I said, you know, this is basically, it gets into the area of like vanity type analytics where, oh, cool, you know, there's a lot of people on the site right now, but you can't really learn much from that. Just to jump back here quickly. So, in terms of navigating through Google Analytics, the two main sections that you should know about is reports, which we'll dive into, and also over here, the admin section. So if you need to add new users, you need to, you know, maybe you're migrating to a different website, you need to get your code, you know, there's all kinds of different settings that you might want to explore. All of that's going to be under admin, but, you know, 90% of the time, you're just going to be in your reports. Okay, so cool. You can see now that someone else visited the website. Let's use this opportunity to, you know, look at locations, and we can see, okay, it came from France. That's kind of cool. So yeah, so the real-time view is kind of nice, but let's move on. The first report that I really consider, you know, an important report would be the audience overview report. And you can see over here, each report has its, you know, like a label. And this is going to give us a high level understanding of the audience to our website, you know, the devices of the individuals coming to the website. So you can see over here in every report, you've got your time frame, and you can easily switch, you know, by default, it's going to give you the last 7 days, but you can easily switch it. Oops. It's a bit weird. What's going on? Okay, something froze there for a sec. So you can easily switch to longer time period. You can pick a custom date range. But by default, we're going to look at the last 7 days. We've got our line graph over here. So each dot in the graph is going to give us the number of users. We can also click over here and change the metric we care about. So I can go from users to sessions and see that trend. Very, very kind of easy to switch. I can also add a secondary metric and do a comparison, but that's kind of more advanced. So If we scroll down over here to this section, this is kind of helpful because it gives us, once again, high-level indication of what's going on the website. So we've got 1,331 users. Out of those, we have 1,257 that are new, basically meaning the first time they visited the site. We have 1,500 sessions. We see number of page views. Google Analytics is going to give us certain metrics out of the box. So we have like pages per session. We have bounce rate, average session duration, etc. If you scroll down over here, it's now kind of given us, segmenting our users by, in this case, language, which is being picked up by the actual browser, or rather the computer that the person visited from. What is the default language? So, Google Analytics collects a lot of information. We can also click on, for example, country, get a country list. We can see browser. And you can see it's very quick to get an understanding, once again, very high level of what's going on here. So I can see here that about 3/4 of people visiting my website are coming from Chrome. Not too interesting at this point, but you can kind of dive in to different levels. For example, which technologies are people using to visit my website. So that's the first report, audience overview. The next report that I think is very interesting for you guys, in the travel space, is the demographics report. This is actually a pretty unique report because, if you look here, we've got information on gender, on age, and you might be thinking, where the hell does this information come from? I never asked my visitors their gender and so on. But once again, this is Google. Knows everything about us. And this is essentially, you can see over here that it's not going to be for 100% of your traffic. In this case, it's about 50% of my traffic. And the reason for that is, what Google is doing is when people are logged into Gmail or their Google accounts, when they visit a website, if I remember correctly, you actually have to opt into it. I don't think it's automatic. But Google is taking, it's aggregating the demographic information of visitors that come to the website that are currently logged into their Google accounts, and they can actually then give you that information in Google Analytics. So this is, kind of interesting. Once again, it's aggregated. You might want to try to drill into this information to really understand what's going on, but we can see, pretty high level information on the audience to our website. Okay, moving on. The next report's probably, my favorite, and it always kind of blows people's minds when they see this for the first time. But Google Analytics is going to give you geo-based information on your visitors, and you have this really nice map view. And essentially, if we scroll down to this table, which is kind of a very common visualization type in Google Analytics, is this table. We can see we have sections, acquisition behavior, and then conversions, which I'll get into. But here we can see, it's ranking the most popular countries where visitors to my website are coming from. And what's also nice is they give you this little percentage of total view. So I can see here instantly that in the last week, about, just over 1/3 of visitors to my website came from the United States. And what's really, really awesome is if I come up to the map view, if I actually click on the US, then it's actually going to give me the information by state. So look how cool this is, and it gives me the conditional formatting. So I can see very clear that California is the most popular state. And I think, in the travel space, this is really key for you guys. If you're doing certain campaigns, targeting certain, locations in the world, you can then use Google Analytics to see, where people are coming from, and where you're popular in the world. And lastly, I can even click on a specific state and get down to the individual city. And since I'm a tech blog, it's not too surprising that this is San Francisco. Let's see if San Francisco is popular in LA. San Francisco is a tech hub, and LA is becoming a tech hub pretty quickly. And once again, we can scroll down, we can see the individual cities, and we can even look at the performance of different cities in terms of the bounce rates, the time on average session duration, etc. So that's really, really neat. And the last, I think this is the last one. No, Actually, I don't think it's the last one. But another audience-related report, which is really useful, is the new versus returning visitors. And the idea here is, if you've got a certain website with a very strong community and a lot of loyalty, then you can actually see the percentage of your visitors which are returning. In my case, about 90% are new, and it's because most people are finding me through Google. And over time, I want this to kind of shift a bit, so more people are coming back, either through email, other means. But this is a good way to understand from a very high level, the loyalty to that the site has and kind of the community aspect. Okay, guys, so time is moving. I do want to kind of move a bit faster. I'm just going to point out some of these reports to you. And like I said, I invite you to play around. I just want you to kind of understand what is possible with Google Analytics. So there's a report on basically desktop versus mobile and tablet traffic. You can see over here that about 30% of traffic to my website is coming from mobile. That's very important because, this number is kind of growing all the time as more and more people get access to smartphones around the world. So you want to make sure your website is mobile friendly, and you can actually look at the performance metrics, things like bounce rate, etc., to see, are you really struggling with, mobile visits versus desktop visits? That's a really key thing. Cool. The next section we want to talk about is acquisition. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got our default channel groupings under the acquisition in the channels report. And here we can see, for example, my website, about 3/4 of traffic is coming from organic search, which is basically Google. And, you want to really look at this report. I think it's one of the most important reports because it will indicate kind of a risk, how much risk your business is under, depending on your traffic mix. So, if you can see here, I have very high reliance on Google or organic search, SEO traffic, essentially. So if Google, for example, goes and changes its algorithm, then I'm going to get, hit hard, and that's not great. So, you want to kind of understand where traffic's coming from a high level, and then try to diversify. Also, you can see, I'm doing email marketing, but I've only had 6 visits in the last 7 days. So, it's an area that I want to, improve on. Less than 1% of users to the website came from email. The next report, which is also kind of useful, is the source medium report. This is kind of now that secondary level. It's more complicated, but you can see over here, for example, you've got your source and your medium. So medium is going to basically put the traffic into the default channel that I showed before. And it's not too complicated to understand what's going on here, but it's more of a granular drill down. Also, by the way, by default, there's always going to be 10 in this table, but it's easy to expand it by just clicking on the show rows. My computer's lagging a bit, so there we go. So I can now basically drill down further into the table, and I've got many options. And once again, we can see here that 70% of traffic is coming from Google organic, and then another 21% is direct. And then there's a big drop off, right? So I'm very heavily reliant on Google, and that's not so good. Okay, let's move a bit quicker. So that's acquisition. The next section that I want to talk about is behavior reports. And this is primarily going to be focusing on page views and the content that people are seeing in your site. So here I'm in the all pages report, and you can see the individual pages, the number of page views, the bounce rates, the entrances, etc. So, you want to spend time here. You can also see, once again, that, it's more of a distribution here, but there's still a lot of traffic viewing only a small number of pages. So, look through your pages. It also might mean you're putting a lot of effort into building out certain pages and they're getting very few views. So it's also a way to indicate, your content marketing efforts. The next report, which is one of my favorite as well, is the landing pages report. This is now focusing specifically on pages where people land on the website. So essentially, where people are landing on your website when they visit the website, when they visit your site. So you can see over here as well, I've got 3 or 4 pages which rank pretty well in Google Analytics, in Google search, and that's why they're coming. And ideally, I want to have a good mix. So about 20% are across these 2 pages, another maybe 40% of my traffic, something like that, are coming to these 5 pages. So that's pretty risky, because it means, if the keyword, if my rankings go down for any of these 5 pages, my traffic's going to get hit. So it's a great way to understand how people are coming to the website. Okay, so I think this is a duplicate. The next topic I want to talk about is conversions. This is kind of the next step in Google Analytics, in that it can be used to actually track the performance of visitors going through your site, because ultimately your website needs to have a certain purpose. In your case, as travel companies, it's maybe to get new subscribers, or to sell travel packages, whatever it is. You need to understand the purpose, and then what you should do is you need to think of your website in terms of a funnel. And what I mean by that is people are going to hit your website on certain pages, and if you're doing a good job, you're going to drive traffic to like a product page, a page where they essentially can fill in a form or enter a credit card and convert, pay you, subscribe, whatever your goals are on the website. And then, typically there's going to be a thank you page or kind of end of funnel page, where when someone gets to this page, we know that they've bought. And, time is moving. I don't want to get too much into details, but Google Analytics has something called goals. And you can essentially set goals in your Google Analytics, which are based on page views, when someone visits a certain page or an event. So just to show you an example, I have this page on my website, this business applications audit. It's one of my service offerings. And at the end of the page, someone can click on this link and fill out a form and essentially become a lead. So what I want to do is I want to understand for myself, the number of people that are visiting this page. So in the conversion section, we have under goals, in the overview report, we can go ahead and pick one of our goals, and we can see, okay, what is the volume of traffic that's coming to the website? The volume of traffic coming to this page. And in this case, you can see in the last week, there's been 3 visitors to the page. It's 0.2% of traffic. So not so great. But, I can drill into, different traffic sources, and now I kind of have a benchmark. I know where I stand, and then I can, work on improving the conversion rate. So it goes from 0.2 to maybe 0.5, 1%, and then more people are visiting that page. So, why this is important is now that we have goals in place and we have that conversion rate, we can actually understand our funnel. We can understand, where we are in terms of making money. So in this example, maybe 60% of traffic from our landing pages are getting to our product page, but from those, only 5% are getting to the thank you page. We now know that this page is actually problematic. We don't have a problem bringing people to this page. We have a problem converting them so that they actually pay us or convert on this page, and then therefore get to the thank you page. So this is, powerful in Google Analytics, and, it's a process to get there. You've got to understand your business, understand the website, what are your goals, set those up, and then do a bit of analysis. So yeah, guys, I'm not sure we're going to have enough time to go through everything else. So maybe I'll just spend just 1 more minute going through the remainder, because I think it's less important. And then, Natalia, if you want to stop now, just tell me. But
I think it's cool if you take like a few more minutes. If you need 5 to 10 minutes more, I think it's very interesting. People are happy to listen a bit more.
Okay, wonderful. Cool, guys. So that's goals. And, there's lots of content online to understand goals and, some examples of how you can set that up for your business. The next is the concept of dashboards. So, I've shown you lots of different reports, and, it's a lot of work to go through those reports each day. So something that Google Analytics built out is the concept of dashboard. And you can go ahead and you can add widgets to your dashboard. And, it just saves a lot of time, because maybe there's only certain metrics you care about. This is an example of a dashboard I built. I actually like to go into the reports and kind of dig around, so I'm not in the dashboard too frequently, but it does, help to, save some time. And I can see over here for the given time frame, my bounce rate, my sessions, my top landing pages, by sessions, by users, and it's pretty flexible. There is a limit to number of widgets you can add here, but if you're focusing kind of having a top-down approach, you shouldn't need to get too crazy, because it's about focus rather than having 100 different numbers to look at. Another really cool feature in Google Analytics, and I purposely left this to the end, is you can do a comparison. So when you pick a date range, so in this case, I'm looking at the last 30 days, all you need to do is click this little compare to, and then automatically it's going to do a comparison to the previous period. And it's very customizable. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could do this week versus last month. I mean, it's not a great example, but you can kind of click around and customize it. But by default, whatever time frame you have and you click compare, it's going to give you the previous. So I'm now looking at the last 30 days and I'm comparing it to the previous 30 days. And you can actually see the dates. They put the dates for you. And you can basically see that, in the last 30 days, my traffic's gone up by, I don't want to get confused here, but about 200 visits or users. I can see that my bounce rate hasn't really changed. And then what's kind of cool in some of the widgets is going to actually give you the percentage change. So I can see here the number of sessions to this specific landing page is up by 15% in the last 30 days compared to the previous. And, it's a good way to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. As I said, in my case, I'm very reliant on Google search. So if, some of my top pages are changing, that's usually a good indication that, my SEO rankings are going up. But if it drops, then I might want to, double down on social and try to, mitigate the damage. So you can do this trick, this, comparison, use this comparison feature in any of the reports. So I wanted to kind of talk now just quickly on the e-commerce component of Google Analytics. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but essentially Google Analytics, as part of its platform, has support for e-commerce analytics, meaning that once you have the e-commerce analytics set up, and it is a bit more complicated than just simply adding a piece of code to your website, then you can start tracking sales and e-commerce activity within Google Analytics. And as I mentioned before, I've basically got an ebook that I sell on my website, and you can see, I went back in time because I'm not selling a lot. You can see over here that I'm looking at revenue, I'm looking at e-commerce conversion rate, transactions, and even product information. And this is, really, really nice extension to the Google Analytics platform. Typically, you're going to be using something like, say, WooCommerce on your WordPress or Shopify, which will have built-in support for e-commerce for Google Analytics. So that saves a lot of time and energy setting it up. But if you've got like a more custom-built website, you might need to bring on a developer or do a lot of homework to learn how to do that, to basically set up the e-commerce component of Google Analytics. But what's actually really, really neat is Google Analytics really pushed the whole e-commerce component. And you can see here in basically any report that you look at, you have this little conversion window over here, and you can see by default, it's going to give you the e-commerce breakdown. And this way I can actually see, imagine there was a lot of transactions here, a lot of money coming in. I can actually break down the revenue by my different traffic sources. So think of them as a marketer, you want to know where the money's coming from. And this is the way you can do it. If you're putting a lot of effort in social, but all your sales are coming from SEO, maybe you want to change your strategy. And this is a way to kind of see. So you can see over here, I've got one sale of $9.99 from Google organic search. Like I showed you here, when we look in the acquisition report, we can do the same in the geo report. So I can actually see that both of the transactions that I had were from the US. And once again, I think for you guys in the travel space, it's very, very key to know where in the world people are are buying your stuff, and this is, you know, the way to do it. You can actually go in here and you can look at your geolocation report, you know, get your e-commerce set up, and you can break down your revenue based on, you know, country, city, state, however you want to do it. The next little, you know, enhancement that you can do within Google Analytics is the concept of segments. So this is kind of more advanced, but essentially, you know, in all the reports we looked at before, I don't know if you noticed, but we're looking at the default segment, which is all users. So no one's been filtered out. But what you can actually do in Google Analytics is you can create your own segments and then just set those as basically like filters, right? So in this case, hopefully it won't be too slow. I've set up a custom segment where a country exactly matches Costa Rica. Now, I mean, in my case, this is not really going to give me any value, but I can now basically, I've got the segment set. I can go into any report and I'm basically looking at any of the reports through the eyes of visitors where the country was equal to Costa Rica. And that's just one example. You can do it based on traffic source, on landing page, you know, and you can do, you know, visitors from Costa Rica that came from Google that landed on page, you know, on the home page. You can build multiple levels of logic. So, you know, once you understand the basics of Google Analytics and you know, now want to really dive really deep, you can use segments to dive in and you know, understand your metrics at a very granular level. Let's see what I wanted to talk about here. Yeah, so I think that's it. Natalia, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks a lot, Justin. I think it was very informative, and we are getting quite some questions, mostly on Travel Massive event page. So I'll start with, there are a few questions about bounce rate. I think some people would like to understand a little bit more, if you can briefly explain. For example, let me send the question. Yeah, Thomas is asking what's actually a bounce rate, and then maybe I'll combine this also with a question from Alberto, because he also would like to understand more about the bounce rate, and is actually there a good bounce rate where below which rate is a failure, or is it depends on what you're targeting?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and bounce rate is definitely a tricky one because it's very unique, you know, to Google Analytics. The first thing I just want to emphasize, there isn't really, you know, there isn't really a benchmark that is a good bounce rate or bad. It really depends on the industry. It depends on the type of blog. You know, if you imagined Twitter having a 90% bounce rate, they would fail as a company because it means that people hit the website and they immediately leave. So, you know, you need to kind of judge it based on the industry, and there's blog posts that kind of dive into that in a bit more detail. I think for the travel space in particular, the bounce rate probably should be a bit lower than what I mentioned, 70 to 90%. But once again, it really depends. If you're very good on Google and people are searching for very specific things, then they're going to read that web page and then they get their answer and maybe they leave. Right? If you've got very bad UX issues on your website, so people hit your website, maybe it's great content, but it's just messy, it doesn't load very well, people are going to leave. So to go back to the definition, a bounce rate is essentially, think of it as someone visits your website and they hit the website on a certain page, and then they leave immediately without visiting a second page. So a bounced session is a session where someone only viewed one page on the website. And the bounce rate is the percentage of your sessions where that happens. Okay, thanks.
Andre is asking a question on YouTube. He's asking how accurate are those data? I guess he means overall, like the data that you get on Google Analytics, can you trust them and how accurate they are?
Yeah, look, if you make the assumption that everything is set up correctly and, you know, you're not loading the code more than once, and, you know, people do make some integration mistakes, assuming, you know, everything's set up correctly, then once again, it's one of those things where you can't really compare it to something else. So it's difficult to know for your specific website, is it super accurate? What I say as a business analyst is it's the best we have. So you have to decide in the world of business intelligence, web analytics, what are we going to trust and what are we going to go with, right? Think of it anywhere in your life. You're getting information all the time. What do we trust? Google Analytics, as I mentioned before, it's being used by tens of millions of websites. It is run by Google, one of the largest tech companies in the world. They have interest for it to be accurate. But once again, people use all kinds of script blockers and all kinds of things to hide their cookies on their computer. So you never really know how accurate, but it's the best we have. And I don't want to just throw out a number, but it's probably more accurate than most people realize.
Okay, thanks. One more question from Alberto. He is asking about organic traffic vs paid traffic. Do you consider paid traffic a good solution? When and what should be the bounds in this case compared with organic? So what should be the bounce rate when it's paid traffic, and what's bounce rate compared to organic traffic?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think as a general rule of thumb, you're going to typically have a higher bounce rate from paid traffic, just because the quality of that traffic is generally not great. It's one of the metrics a paid marketer would look at. If there's a very high bounce rate, then maybe they need to modify their campaigns so it's performing better. But it's more of a business question to me. What is more useful for the business, paid versus organic? I'm a big fan of content marketing, and I'm sure many of the viewers are watching right now are fans of content marketing, because it's good for the travel space. And if you do well on Google, it's free traffic, once you're ranking, of course. So, but if you're good at it, you have high conversion rates, and you have a positive ROI from your paid traffic, then carry on doing it, because your business will ultimately grow. Yeah.
Thanks, makes sense. Next question from Maria. She is asking, how does Google Analytics track returning visitors? How long after they visited for the first time they count as return?
It's a good question. I can't remember the exact time range, but basically, as I mentioned, Google Analytics is tracking based on cookies. So assuming anyone can go in and delete their cookies. So if someone goes and delete their cookies and then goes back to the website, then they're going to show up as a new visitor. But assuming they don't delete their cookies, and they don't have anything blocking cookies from loading, then I can't remember the exact time range, but Maria can run a quick Google search and she'll see it might be as long as a year. It could be 30 days. I can't remember the exact time frame, but basically each cookie has a lifespan. And assuming you don't delete the cookie, it's going to exist up until the expiration date for the cookie. And then if they come back to the website, it would be considered a new visit. But I think it could be a year. I think it's a long time.
Okay, great, thanks. Let me check what are our next questions. Well, Alberto is asking, which is the best percent in terms of conversion? I think probably the higher percent, that's the best, right?
Well, it's a good question. And, there's a very much, what would I call it? Like a rule of thumb, very kind of unscientific of a 2% conversion rate. So, in e-commerce, typically you've got around a 2%. If you've got higher than 2%, you're doing great. Some of the best will do 8%, stuff like that. But once again, it really depends. I have a very low conversion rate, but, on my site, is that good or is that bad? It depends on my goals of the website. And, if you've got a small conversion rate but a lot of traffic, you might still be doing very well. So it's impossible to say. It depends on a lot of factors, how the website looks, how does it load, how much effort is being dealt in the UX, the UI, where the traffic's coming from. But what I hope people understand from this presentation is now that you have a way to get the benchmarks, you now know where you stand, then you can decide is this good or bad for us. But even if you're not sure, you can now always try to improve it and run experiments and make changes to the website to improve it. So bounce rates is an easy one to understand. If you make the website look better, you you make it easier for people to navigate, you make it load better on mobile, your bounce rate should improve, right? It's pretty obvious.
Okay, thanks. Guido is asking, what is the difference between referrals and affiliates? So when you were speaking about the channels.
Yeah, it's a good question. If you, and Natalia, I'm not sure if we can, but we can maybe share my presentation so people can download it themselves. We can maybe put it on Google Drive or Dropbox or something.
Of course. And also, anyway, they can see the recording anytime after.
All right, that's true. So, Ido, if you went back and look in the video, I have a slide where I show you a quick search term you can do in Google to get the exact logic behind each of the different categories, the default channel groupings. Affiliate is basically when you set the medium, the UTM medium equals affiliate, it's going to put it in that bucket. So that's the logic for affiliate, but you can get that full understanding straight from Google. So just run a search, default channel grouping logic, and go to the support page of Google's, and they'll give you the exact logic. Referrer is going to basically be when someone comes to the website and Google knows where they came from. So it's not kind of behind, if it's from an email, if it's a very secure connection where people came from, then it would be under direct. But typically, if I click on a link in a blog and I get to your website, Google knows that I came from that blog, and that would become referrer or referral.
Okay. Okay, great. Let me check for more questions. I think it's an interesting question from Marcus. He's saying, in your channels report, your second best channel is direct, 21%. Does that mean you don't know or can't see where those visitors coming from?
It's basically spot on. It's direct, as I mentioned, it's everything which isn't in any of the other categories. It's kind of the other category. The one thing, though, that people must remember is if you're doing a lot of email marketing, so you've got a big email list and you're sending out newsletters, and you have links to your website, and you don't add UTMs to your links, then people coming to your website are now in the direct bucket. So that's a very common way. It's a very common thing I see where people don't understand the concept of UTM tagging of links, and they're not adding UTM medium equals email, and therefore when they come to the website, Google Analytics doesn't know where they came from, because all the email solutions today are basically secured, and you don't really know people came from Gmail or wherever they came from their email inboxes. So direct, there's a way to reduce the amount of traffic appearing in the direct category, and the way to do that is to add UTMs to your links. Everything else you don't really have control over, unfortunately.
Thanks. One more question from Alberto. He's asking about hashtags, which functions they have.
Well, hashtags are only going to be relevant within the platforms which support them as part of their products. So in Twitter, for example, if you click on a hashtag, it will take you to the search page for that hashtag. It's built into the product as a component, Twitter as a feature. Twitter knows how to identify hashtags, and therefore, there's features built around that. Google Analytics has nothing to do with hashtags. If someone clicks on a hashtag, it's not going to take you to anywhere. It doesn't act as a link. So I don't know if Alberto wants to kind of explain that in a bit more detail, but hashtags is not going to be relevant for web analytics.
Okay, thanks. Well, yeah, Alberto can always get in touch with you and ask you more questions, right?
Sure, always.
Yeah. Elena is asking if you can do a perform analysis of their website, and I already shared your contacts, so I guess you can talk directly.
Yeah, she can reach out, Justin at projectbi.net. Find me on LinkedIn is another option, whatever she prefers. And yeah, I do consulting around Google Analytics. So if you need some help in that area, I'd be happy to have a chat and see how I can help.
Thanks. And I think it's probably our last question. It's a question from Ian. He is asking, what % of web visitors use web tracking blockers?
It's a good question. I don't have a number off the top of my head. I believe there's some good blog posts out there that kind of dive into this. It's probably something we'll never know for sure because no one's really going out surveying people to get a sense. There's probably some guesstimations out there on the percentage of people that do. But over time, as browser technologies expand and more things like ad blockers and that come up, it's gonna increase the percentage of traffic which is not trackable or easily trackable. There's also more and more competitors to Google Analytics. When GDPR in Europe was launched, there was big discussions over things like Google Analytics, and there's actually a few competitors that have come out which basically say, listen, we'll give you your web analytics, but we don't track people. It's very kind of basic in how they handle it. To kind of play off of the whole privacy discussion that happened a few years ago. But I can't tell you off the top of my head. But once again, as a business analyst, it's less around, did we have 1,000 people or 1,200? Are we growing? Are we growing? Is the performance improving? It's, if you're not tracking people today because of ad blockers, you're not going to track them tomorrow. So just work with the 80% or the 90% that you do have in terms of the traffic to your site, and then make your decision based on that. But you can't expect perfection in this world; it just doesn't exist.
Okay, great. I think that was our last question for today. Thanks a lot, Justin. It was a great, informative presentation. It's great to see so many people joining us and watching us live. I'm sure many more people will actually watch the recording as well. So yeah, anyone who wants to rewatch it, please feel free to use the same Travel Massive event page. The recording will be saved there. Also, you can find it on Travel Massive YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. It was great.
Yeah,
I shared your contacts, Justin, on the live chat, so people can get in touch with you. They can also find you on Travel Massive and get in touch there, or find you on LinkedIn. Thanks. Thanks everyone for joining, and I hope to see you on one of our next live events by Travel Massive, Hoi An and Untitled Chapter.
Well, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you, Natalia.